Okay, hello everyone. I'm Cchavi Vasisht and I'm an educator at Unacademy platform and I'm a faculty of sociology at NICE IS. And today I have come up with this topic, the poverty problem in India. And here we'll be discussing this topic from the perspective of your general studies paper, mains, especially your GS paper 1 and GS paper 3. And also we'll be looking at it from the essay perspective. That how you can write a better essay for your this topic, the poverty problem in India. So this class is divided into 6 sections. First is what is poverty, then the causes of poverty, third the issues related to poverty, issues related to poverty line, policies and programs towards poverty alleviation, and critical assessment of poverty alleviation programs. Right. So let us start with this topic and be assured that this would be a general studies oriented class and not sociology oriented. However, I'm a faculty of sociology. I have brought in the perspectives from a sociological subject so that you can write a better answer for your GS paper 1, because every subject that is there in your UPSC journey, there is a certain vocabulary, there is a certain perspective that you need to add in your answers, right? So let us start with it. What is poverty? What do you understand by poverty? Basically, poverty is nothing but it is a state of lack of material resources. Whenever you have to introduce a very basic term, a term which is already mentioned in your syllabus, you need to learn its definition. Any answer that you start which is already a part of your syllabus, please keep your syllabus in front of you whenever you are doing your studies, or just stick it around your wall so that you know, okay, these are the particular words that are mentioned in the syllabus and you need to learn their definitions. Poverty, development, empowerment, gender, any topic that is written in the syllabus, you must learn its definition. It becomes very easy for you to introduce your answer, right? So what is poverty? In general sense term, we would either say it, okay, something which anybody who's living below USD $1, or in the Indian perspective, if anybody is having in the rural areas certain amount less than that, or in the urban area certain amount less than that, or somebody does not having access to resources. A definition of it would be that it is a state of lack of material resources, especially measured in terms of income. If you see, even in our poverty line, we have kept a particular number to define that the people below this number, or people earning income below this number, are poor. So basically we measure it in terms of income, which are considered necessary to participate in the society. So what is it? It is a state of deprivation which reflects the inability of an individual to satisfy certain basic needs for a sustained, healthy and productive living. So we are talking about the access to basic resources, and the lack of access to these basic resources tends to categorize us as poor, or somebody who is below poverty line. So what are the two approaches? How do you understand that what is poverty? There are basically two major approaches towards it. One is the understanding of absolute poverty. What is this absolute poverty? Absolute poverty means that this poverty holds or is grounded in the idea of subsistence of the basic conditions, your food, nutrition, health, education. Bilkul basic needs which are being satisfied. Therefore, in World Bank terms, it is often categorized as somebody who's earning USD less than $1, right? Or in India, we have a poverty line. Basically, absolute poverty is something which is characterized by your poverty line. The problem with this understanding of poverty is that you are not able to distinguish between the basic needs of human beings and the basic needs of human beings amongst a society, within a society and across society. So absolute poverty is not a defining term, or is not a definition that one needs to follow. These days what we understand is the relative poverty. What is relative poverty? Basically, this poverty relates to the overall standard of living. And here you are understanding it from a particular societal perspective. This poverty is basically culturally defined. that is the understanding of relative poverty, that you are understanding overall standard of living of people, and within the society you're understanding it from the deprivation perspective. That is, it is culturally defined how much you are less within amongst the other people, right? So these are the two major approaches to understand what is poverty. But before I go forward, let me just introduce you to two major themes to understand poverty, which we use in sociology also. And this you can often write as a part of your essay or as your part of your GS paper 1. That what are the theories related to poverty? In general, there are two major theories related to poverty. The first one is the blame the victim approach. Blame the victim approach or theories. These set of theories understand that poverty is a result of the individual, the pathology or inadequacy of the individual to come out of his or her deprivation and have a better standard of living. It is because they lack the skills, they have a physical weakness, they are not having the motivation, they want to remain poor. And this is something often we say in general knowledge sense also, that if someone is not, for example, if someone is begging on the street, we often tend to say that, oh, he's begging because he doesn't want to work, or she's begging because she doesn't want to work. So often we term or we understand these set of theories as blame the victim approach. The next set of theories, I'm just telling you this in brief. I'm not going into the details of it. For example, if had we done it from a sociological perspective, or we were doing sociological theories, I would have introduced you to Charles Murray, who has basically talked about this dependency culture, which has led to the conditions of poverty. However, I am not including that. But in case if any one of you is interested to read about the blame the victim approach, this is given by Charles Murray. This is just an additional thing if you want to add in your GS answer. But even if you don't do so, you can, or in your essay, even if you don't do so, that is completely fine. But just have a perspective of this, that in our common understanding also, we often tend to blame the individual himself or herself for its condition. Charles Murray has talked about this in his theory, where he has defined how the government welfare provisions are actually demotivating or creating a subculture where the individuals are not motivated to work, right? So basically he blames the government welfare provisions and says that, a dependency culture has been created because of these welfare provisions provided by the government, right? So an individual is responsible for his or her condition. The next is the blame the system approach. This is more comprehensive way of understanding poverty, where you are seeing that an individual is not a factor or not a resultant of his own conditions, but of the socio-cultural conditions around him or her. An individual is produced and reproduced by the structural forces, by the social structural forces around him. For example, which caste he or she belongs to, what is its gender, which ethnic minority do they belong to, whether they belong to the tribal group or not. And this brings me to a very important point here, is that who actually are poor? We often tend to understand, and recently UPSC also gave you the question on feminization of poverty. Right? There are certain sections of society who are more poorer. And this is here, you need to see your 2016 essay question, where a direct essay question was on the World Bank report of sharing prosperity. And this was the report which highlighted how there are certain sections of society who are more poorer than the others. For example, in rural India, poverty is more vis-a-vis in urban India. Within the SCs and STs, more poor people are concentrated vis-a-vis in the general category. So this was a very interesting report. I would put the link down below for this report, and you can refer to that report. It is a very important report. Until now, we haven't got another update of that report. So do refer to that report, because it is talking about how we need to share our prosperity so that all the world can grow together. And specifically in the Indian context, it has talked about how the poverty levels differ across society. For example, there are certain states the geographical distribution of poverty is varies. For example, UP, Bihar have a higher concentration of poor people vis-a-vis other states. Then gender, how more females are poor vis-a-vis males. Then your SCs and STs are more poorer vis-a-vis other sections of the society. Your rural area is having a higher concentration of poor people vis-a-vis other area. Why I refer to this report? Because this report talks about how the system needs to be blamed for the poor conditions of the society, right? So an individual is a reproduction or is reproduced by the structural forces of the society, right? Now these were the two theories which you can refer to in your GS paper 1 and your essay as well, right? Again, I'm not giving you the thinker's name. If any one of you who is interested can put the question down below and I would add the thinker's name to it, right? Next slide. What are the causes of poverty? Why poverty has increased? What is the reasons for the growing poverty in India? Poverty is not a recent phenomenon. It is not something that we got in the post-independent era. It is something which is given to us via colonial rule. If you can recollect, Dadabhai Naoroji was the first one to talk about this poverty problem in India. Just bear the spellings. It's Naorogi. I think I've written it correctly. Right. So his book, Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. Right. He was the first one. This theory was put forward by him that because of the colonial rule, India is suffering by the problem of economic drain. What is it? Economic drain refers to a portion of national product of India which was not available for its own consumption but was being drained to Britain for the political reasons. So, poverty is not something which is a result or a consequence which happened in the independent India or is something of a recent origin but has the historical roots. Now, if you see, this is a very important topic from your perspective of GS paper 1 as well as your prelims. If you can go back and recheck your 2015 prelims paper, their nationalist critique of colonial economy. This was one of the questions that who all within the three categories had critiqued the colonial rule from the economic perspective. And within this, it is Dadabhai Naoroji, N.G. Ranade, Ramesh Chandra Dutt, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, G. Subramaniam Iyer, and Prithvish Chandra Ray. Right. This was a straight question in your prelims paper, 2015 or 14. You can go back and recheck it. But one of the major reasons, if you have to write in GS paper 1 or you have to write in your GS paper 3 or in your essay, one of the major reasons for poverty in India, or poverty became a national problem in India, is because of the colonial rule. Hope that's clear to you and you will read more on it in your spectrum or you can read it in your NCERT book. The second factor for increasing poverty is your high growth rate of population. If you see in India, and this is something I'll be doing in one of the next classes, is of the population dynamics. You will notice that since 1921, our death rate has drastically declined and reached to around 7 to 8%. But our birth rate, which has been a contributing factor to the growing population, has not declined so drastically. The gap between the death rate and the birth rate has been there and has been consistently existing, and that is the reason that we have a high growth rate of population. Death rate reduced because your medical facilities increase, but the birth rate is a socio-cultural phenomenon. You know, in sociology also we do how fertility is a sociological phenomenon or a socio-cultural phenomenon. Similarly, the birth rate, reduction of birth rate did not happen drastically as the death rate declined. So we have a high rate of growth rate of population. But this high growth rate of population is accompanied by the slow economic growth. Had we grown economically stronger, there would have been equal access for resources for everyone. Though you can completely argue that, the trickle-down theory did not work in India, but slightly, if we had more better job opportunities, poverty rate would have reduced. So, the slow economic growth and the high growth rate of population are two contributing factors, compounding factors which has increased the poverty in India. Third, our productive resources are not equally distributed. We have seen that in India, and this is not a problem of India. We often tend to say that, okay, India is facing the problem of discrimination, but that is not true. All across the world, the criteria would differ, the base or the factor would differ, but every country has the problem of discrimination. And this is also one of the factors that has led to the problem of poverty, that there is unequal distribution of productive resources because there is discrimination on the basis of caste, class, religion, gender, which is leading to the inequalities. For example, if you take caste, there are multiple studies. You can refer to Jodka study, you can refer to multiple studies where you have, for example, M.N. Srinivas talks about the dominant caste who have concentrated the resources within tribal groups. There are certain tribal groups who have concentrated the resources, for example, Minas. Then class, the upper class have concentrated the resources, and the middle class and the lower middle class and the lower class continues to suffer. They do not have access to resources. Then talk about religion. If you read such a committee report, you will see that how Muslims do not have equal access to resources. They lack in terms of education, gender. I mean, who wouldn't know about gender? If you want to really learn about the gender inequalities or lack of women economic participation, how there are inequalities in that, you can refer to my previous lectures that I have taken in the YouTube session, that how there is gender inequalities at work, right? So these all are leading to unequal distribution of productive resources, and here we are talking about land and other resources, which are leading to inequalities in the country and therefore result in poverty. There's a separate topic that we do in our sociology option, that is feminization of poverty. Then poor planning and resource mobilization. This is something you often refer to in your GS paper too, that, and this is one of the things that I would refer to in the last slide of the class also, that you are not able to have a proper governance structure. The planning is poor, there is basically ad hoc planning, and you're not able to address the problem of poverty comprehensively. And then the resources are not mobilized correctly. That leads to the continuation of the poverty problem, right? Poor planning, poor resource mobilization, you're not effectively tracing poverty. And that is the reason that you see that Niti Aayog has now talked about tracing the last 30% of the population who are poor, and then categorizing within this 30% the last 10% who comes in the category of poorest of the poor. And Niti Aayog is trying to trace them so that we can address the problem of poverty. In the World Bank report, if you refer to the World Bank report, you will see that World Bank report clearly states that the responsibility of decreasing the poverty across the world or reducing the inequalities across the world lies solely on India, because China has been able to control it and India has not been able to control it till now. So across the world, the burden of reducing poverty, reducing inequalities falls on India. Then the socio-cultural factors, social obligations, religious ceremonies, a very important factor when you often read about farmer suicide is that they are not, they commit suicide or they are not able to repay their loan for the money lenders. And why do they take loan? Basically, the problem is that they want to create or do these lavish weddings. And that is the reason that they take loan from the money lenders, because they are burdened by the social obligation of wedding the girl away in a proper manner. And day by day, if you see, these weddings and these grand celebrations have become more and more elaborate. These are not done for the purpose of performing a ceremony, but these are done as a purpose of, showing more class, showing off your resources, showing off your status in the society. It has become a status symbol. So these are the factors that are leading to increasing poverty. You do a marriage of 30-40 lakhs, and then what? You're paying off your rentals, you're paying off your loans, you're paying off this. This is how an individual slips in the circle of poverty. And then the institutional factors.
when you understand the human capabilities, the concept of human capabilities given by Amartya Sen clearly talks about two things: education and health. Any country, any individual, if they want to develop their capabilities, or if they want the human beings to develop their capabilities, they have to work on the education and health. And what is happening in India? These are the two things which lack the contribution from the side of the government. Overall, we have yet not achieved the target of 6% of GDP to be spent on education. Health services are poor, and that you have clearly seen in the times of COVID-19. So, and more recently, we are also talking about skills. How skills are an important factor to understand the conditions of how to get job or employment. People are not skilled, people are not trained to have employment, right? Even in COVID-19, and within this causes of poverty, you can also add another cause here, that the natural disasters or pandemics are also the reason for poverty. For example, I was recently reading a report which stated that the progress that we achieved in the last 22 years to curtail or to eliminate poverty, we are going to slip back on it. Poverty is going to increase as a result of COVID-19, and that has actually happened. There are reports to suggest that. What I am referring to is a report by McKinsey, but you can refer to more reports, and these are the things that you need to highlight when you're talking about the causes of poverty. I hope this is clear, and this is clear from your GS and your essay perspective. Now let us talk about what are the issues related to poverty. This is not something when you are talking about issues related to poverty from a GS3 perspective. This is a question which is part of your GS paper 1. The good point or the highlighting point about GS paper 1 is that you have to talk about the social perspective. You have to talk about the individual perspective. So we will look at issues related to poverty from a sociological perspective, right? That is how you have to write in your GS paper 1. The first and foremost issue related to poverty is that poverty leads to material deprivation and social exclusion. Social exclusion is a topic which I'll be taking separately along with inequalities in India. But here, just to have a brief introduction of it, social exclusion means that you are not included in the society in terms of either political participation, economic participation, social participation. All these participations are restricted. You are excluded from the society, and that is because of the material deprivation. And this leads to lack of integration within the economy. So the biggest problem related to poverty is that you are excluded from the mainstream society, from the mainstream economy, and you don't have that integration within the economy. Then you must understand, and this was a theory which was earlier propounded also, that the more number of hands, the more you're able to fight poverty. So as soon as a child is born, and especially this is with regard to the girl child, that they are not sent to schools. A child is forced to perform labor. If you see within the poorer families, families who are stricken by poverty, the children are not going to education institutes. Rather, they are forced to do child labor. Child labor again is a completely separate topic that you can do with regard to your GS paper 1. So what happens is that child is pushed to perform child labor, and this affects their biological and psychological development. Another factor of contributing to this biological or restricting biological and psychological development of the child is lack of nutrition, lack of food that they are not able to access because of poor conditions, because of poverty. Then, underutilized resources. As I just introduced you to Amartya Sen concept of developing human capabilities, and these capabilities can only develop if your health and your education is good, is up to the mark. But within the poverty circles, this is not up to the mark. So therefore, your human capital or your human capabilities are not developed. And because of this, your overall social growth is retarded. Society as an overall institution is not growing. Then, lack of solidarity. Now, you know that you have been deprived and socially excluded by the basic services of the society, and you are not integrated into the society. So, what will this lead to? It will lead to lack of solidarity. Then, it leads to multiple marginalizations which is rooted in inequalities, and it accentuates with it. This means that there is discrimination. Discrimination in terms of caste, discrimination in terms of gender, discrimination in terms of old age. You must have seen topics where you talk about poverty within the old people, poverty amongst feminization of poverty, or within certain caste groups being more affected because of poverty. So this leads to multiple marginalization problem. And finally, when you are not socially included, when you don't have solidarity with the society, this would ultimately lead to social unrest. Social unrest here means that there would be higher incidence of crime and deviance. Now, there are multiple theories to suggest that the incidence of crimes or deviance occur more among the poorer sections of the society, right? They are the ones who are committing more crime. They are the ones who are deviant. You see slum people, the reports come out that they are more deviant or committing crime. So all these are the problem or the issues related to poverty. And this is from a GS perspective, GS paper 1 and for your essay. Now, what is the issue related to poverty line? If you have seen that in India, there are various agencies and different criteria are being used by these various agencies. For example, NSSO looks at the socio-economic development aspect. Ministry of Rural Development looks at the rural consumption. CSO looks at the GDP. All these agencies are looking at different criteria to define poverty. And similarly, you had a Tendulkar report. You had many other reports who had given a Rangarajan report. You have seen that everyone is using a different criteria or including a different perspective to understand poverty. So what is the issue related to poverty? The first one is that you are using a monetary basis mechanism. I told you earlier also there are two approaches to look at poverty. One is the absolute, which talks about the poverty line, and one is the relative. So monetary basis mechanism is that you're just looking at poverty from the expenditure which is being done on food and other items. And this you're looking at as a proxy to the income. But does poverty only mean that whatever you eat or whatever you do your expenditure on the other essential items? What actually defines poverty for an individual is the relative poverty. The people who are middle class in India may be equivalent to the standards or living the standards of what people are living in the West amongst the poor sections of the society. So what is the mechanism or what is the mechanism that you should adopt to define your poverty line? Then it clubs together all poor and it is not differentiating between the poor and the very poor. Till now, the poverty line was a basic definition. For example, around 1200 below people in the rural area earning below 1200 or people having the calorie consumption of below 3200. Somewhere around this was the criteria that in the urban areas they are having calories below this much, in rural areas they are having calories below this much. This is not differentiating between the poor and the very poor. And that is one of the major issues which is related to poverty line, that you are not able to target the people who are actually in need of the government welfare schemes. Therefore, now, as I told you, Niti Aayog is working towards it and is tracking down the bottom 30% so that they can actually target the poorer sections of the society. Because Niti Aayog is talking about elimination of poverty. Till now, we were focusing on alleviation of poverty, right? Then, many factors other than income and expenditure are related to poverty. As I told you, poverty is not something that you can just understand from the perspective of your calorie count. For example, your quality education, your health services, your drinking water and so on are not taken into consideration. For example, let me just tell you that for drinking water, women have to walk thousands of kilometers away, or not exactly thousands, but hundreds of kilometers away to fetch water. What happens is that their productive time, which could have been used for them to be employed, is getting reduced. And therefore the poverty continues. So access to these basic services is essential for an individual to have full economic potential, to reach up to their full economic potential. Then it doesn't take into consideration the social factors that trigger or perpetuate poverty, such as economic discrimination, political discrimination. For example, when we talk about poverty, we don't take into account political discrimination. For example, let's take the example of Rohingya communities who were expelled from Myanmar. Till date, they are not given the political participation in the country. So what does this lead to? That leads to the continuation of poor conditions within those people, because you don't have the right, or you are not empowered to alleviate yourself or to have equal access to resources. And the poverty line does not address these concerns. It does not address your social discrimination. It does not address your political discrimination. Right? So these were the issues related to poverty line. Now let's talk about the policies and programs towards poverty alleviation. What has the Indian government adopted, or what ways or policies has Indian government adopted to address the problem of poverty? Basically, in our Indian Constitution, and in the Indian Constitution itself, we talked about the social justice, social, economic, political. You remember in the preamble itself, we are talking about the justice aspect. Within the Constitution itself, you have directive principles of state policy, which is addressing the problem of poverty. And to address poverty, we adopted 5-year plans. In every plan, we were trying to enhance employment opportunities. We were trying to enhance growth so that poverty could be alleviated. So let's talk about the 3 broader approaches or dimensions that we have adopted since the independence in India. The first one is the growth-oriented approach. This was the approach we adopted in the initial years of independence, that is 1950s and 60s. We believe that poverty could be removed if there was economic growth within the country. And this economic growth would trickle down to the other sections of the society, to the poorer sections of the society. We could focus on industries, development of big industries. We also later focused on agriculture. And our idea, the broader idea was that with the help of trickle-down theory, this growth would reach the poorer sections of the society and they will be employed and the poverty would be reduced. But did this happen? This did not happen. Rather, the disparities increased. Then we adopted the specific poverty alleviation programs. This we adopted since the 3rd 5-year plan. What was it? For example, we started having self-employment programs. We promoted self-employment programs. Example of this is Rural Employment Generation Program. Then we adopted wage employment programs. These are specifically targeting the poorer people. They are trying to generate employment so that work can be generated, economic opportunity can be generated, and they can be pulled out of poverty. So self-employment programs, for example, Rural Employment Generation Program, wage employment program, for example, National Food for Work, Sampoorna Gram Rozgar Yojana, all these were implemented to address the wage employment in the country. Then self-help groups. If you see, this is a separate topic. SHGs is a separate topic where you are trying to focus or understand how these self-help groups have addressed various problems in the society. For example, when we talk about poverty, self-help groups have a major contribution. When we talk about women empowerment, self-help groups have been very active and very result-oriented and have supported the problem, or have addressed the problem of women empowerment. So these 3 were the major approaches, specific approaches to address the problem of poverty, or to alleviate the poverty in the country. After that, we adopted the minimum basic needs approach. We have moved beyond creating the economic opportunities, and this we adopted from the 5th 5-year plan. If you remember, Indira Gandhi had come up with the notion of Garibi Hatao scheme, and there you were trying not just to create employment, but you were also focusing on food. Then we launched BTS, we launched ICTS, we launched midday meal scheme to address the problem of poverty, right? And within this, we had also launched schemes or programs where you were targeting of constructing the roads. For example, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. You were looking at social security programs to address the overall social security aspect or address the overall approach towards poverty. Now, this is very much related to the relative poverty concept, because here you are trying to give the basic amenities to all sections of the society. Right. So this is your policies and programs towards poverty alleviation. Right. Now, what is the critical assessment of these poverty alleviation programs? How do you look at these programs, whether they have been successful or not? And if not, what is the reason? There are three major reasons or three major failures because of which poverty continues. We have evolved policies in a progressive manner, and despite this, despite evolving of various policies, we have not undergone a radical transformation, though the percentage of absolute poor, let me just remind you this, that the percentage of absolute poor has decreased. But if we see the overall numbers, poorer people are still there in India. We have not been able to completely eliminate the problem of poverty. Right? What are these three failures? The first is the governance. I told you there are ad hoc ways or ad hoc policies that are adopted where you are not maintaining a comprehensive governance structure to address the problem of poverty. Various policies come in and they are not comprehensively addressing the problem of poverty. Then comes implementation. Ad hoc way of implementation. Certain section of the society, certain section of the government is responsible for employment. Certain section is employment for women empowerment. Certain section is responsible for discrimination. For example, you have National SC Commission or National ST Commission. Comprehensively, you're not implementing the poverty alleviation programs. Therefore, implementation needs to be comprehensive. And finally, you have policies, you have programs, but there is no monitoring. And when there is no monitoring, that leads to the failure of poverty alleviation programs. And that's why if you see Niti Aayog is tracking the last 30%. You need to monitor. You have brought down the policy, you have got the policy on table, but who is going to monitor it? Who is going to trace whether you have been successful in eliminating it or not? So these are the three major failures because of which the poverty in the country has continued to exist, or the problem of poverty continues to exist in India. Now, to conclude, and before I conclude this section, I just want you to look at these solutions. How would you solve the problem of poverty in India? Right? I couldn't get another slide attached to it, so I will just address it here. Let me just remove whatever I can from this framework. Right. So whenever you talk about solutions, there are 2-3 approaches that you need to keep in mind. For example, one set of solutions would be general solutions. That is, for example, you're looking at education. You must address the problem of education. Higher education reforms should be there. Education should be such that it is functional. Engineering, for example. Engineers बहुत हैं हमारे पास, but are those engineers functional engineers? Engineering करके they are doing something else. Engineering करके they are sitting at family business. Engineering करके they are coming to UPSC. So is this education actually functional? So one of the major things to address the problem of poverty, make education functional. Then skill development, and this is something the recent government has also been focusing on, that you need to develop the skills of the individual to enhance their employment opportunities. Right. Third is adolescent development. Since the teenage age itself, you must focus on the development of adolescent, because they are the ones who are going to further increase their employment, or they are going to further have the opportunities to address the problem of poverty. And then opportunities for self-employment. This is very important. Currently, we are looking at entrepreneurship as a very pertinent or an important component in the economy. These entrepreneurs have the potential to rise up and to address the problem of poverty in the country. And not just in the country, but across the world. If you see, entrepreneurship has become very important within the academic circles and within various scholars who are trying to work on entrepreneurship and see how it addresses the problem of society. And that's why Government of India has also launched Startup India Stand-up Vidya program, Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana, Startup Village Entrepreneurship Yojana. So self-employment via these entrepreneurship schemes is very important to address the problem of poverty. Now, this is one set of solutions. What are the other sets? You basically look at the troubled areas. What are the troubled areas? And this is something I would just go slow and you can write it down. Is that, for example, you look at the red corridors. If you see, poverty is highest amongst Bihar, Odisha, Andhra Pradesh. There the poverty levels have increased. So you specifically look at areas where left-wing extremism have increased and you try to address or create employment opportunities there. Now let me just correct myself and tell you information here that left-wing extremism or Naxalism has reduced drastically in India. The incidents related to Naxalism has reduced drastically, and this is one of the biggest success within the Indian security structure, that you have been able to reduce the problem of Naxalism. The red corridors have reduced, the percentage of incidents have reduced. So the way to address the poverty in the country is that you look at troubled areas specifically and have schemes related to these areas. So within the red corridor, you try to look at what are the problems and you set up schemes for that area. For example, Chhattisgarh government has created livelihood colleges. Chhattisgarh government has created livelihood colleges to address or create poverty, to address the problem of poverty and to create employment opportunities, to make education more functional. Also, there is Institute Prayas to prepare them for competitive exams. So you are trying to bring together the adolescent people, and these adolescent people would help in further creating employment opportunities and address the problem of poverty. Right? Then you look at Northeast. You know that poverty is more among the tribal sections of the society. So you specifically have a scheme to address the problem of poverty or create employment opportunities within the Northeast India. For example, Skill Development Ministry planned a skill development mission and a state livelihood mission for Northeast India. We also have a Northeast Development Finance Corporation, which is launching the venture capital for the startups in Northeast India. So you're specifically looking at Northeast and you're trying to create employment opportunities or livelihood opportunities in Northeast India. Then J&K is something which was a very problematic issue for India since the time of independence. But now since we have integrated it into the mainstream India, we have to look at how we can create employment opportunities there. The country the state has been very much unstable, politically unstable, inflicted by a lot of crisis. So you need to ensure that there are employment opportunities so that poverty can be reduced. For example, you have specific Udan scheme. You have Sadbhavna scheme, which was launched by the Indian Army, and where Army has created goodwill schools, and you are giving the students of J&K national integration tours. So you have to look at specific programs like this. For example, Rural Development Ministry has also launched a Himayat scheme. Rural Development Ministry has launched Himayat scheme. See, prelims and mains is not disintegrated. Often I have reiterated this earlier also. Prelims, mains, interview are integrated. Abhi, whatever schemes I have told you, whatever reports I have referred to, these all come in your prelims in one form or the other. For example, National Skiptik, I told you, has already come in your examination. World Bank report has come in your mains. These schemes, standalone schemes, for example, once there was a question that what is Udan related to? Udan scheme is related to what? So these are very simple questions that you can answer very easily with the help of if you have comprehensively prepared for your mains. And that's why this is my biggest suggestion to all the students out here, that please prepare for your mains first and then start your prelims. Because if you're not prepared for your mains, you have lacked or you miss in having a comprehensive understanding of the subject. If you're prepared for your mains, you have a comprehensive understanding of the subject, and that's why you will be able to write your better prelims. Right. Apart from this, how would you move forward to address the problem of poverty? This is something which was mentioned in your economic survey, that you map the aspirations of the youth. You try to trace the aspirations of the youth and see that what are the skills that they want to acquire, or how they want to address the problem of employment. Then you mobilize the youth by creating skills within themselves. Skills are very important way to have, sometimes you must have often heard that it is the experience that matters. What is this experience? Basically, you are trained. Skills have been given to you. Therefore, skills are very important. And a very important point here is that you bridge the infrastructure gaps. And how can these be reduced is via addressing the troubled areas. You have to see that the private institutes or the government IITs, they are more concentrated in West and South, whereas they lack in North and Northeast India. So you need to look at how these things are missing. In case you are you're thinking that where is ma'am speaking all these information from, there was a Yojana in 2017 or 18, which was specifically addressing the problem of poverty in India. The Yojana itself was the poverty problem in India and how we can look a way forward to it. So these were all the suggestions that they had given. For example, reskilling and upskilling of the learning, school to work transition surveys. All these things were written in that Yojana. Sometimes your knowledge, UPSC is not a one-year journey. Trust me, the ones who says that they became in first attempt, or they were the ones who have cleared in 1 year. Basically, your knowledge builds up. And one of the very honest interviews that I had heard during my preparation was of a person who had cleared, and he said that he was studying for UPSC or the overall journey since class 11th, and he was reading Indian Express newspapers. So this journey is not just for 1 year. Now I'm talking to you about, or I'm teaching you something which I read during my preparations in the Yojana, and that knowledge has built up till now. So don't take this preparation as standalone 1 year preparation, but you have to build your knowledge, and this is a time-taking process. So don't be disheartened, or don't be in a hurry to do everything. Go slow, build up your knowledge. Knowledge is power. You must have often heard of this phrase, but it is actually true. And this would be visible when you write your prelims, when you write your mains, and finally your interview. Your knowledge is going to show, and it would be your biggest strength, your biggest power in this examination, right? So with this, I come to the end of this class. And before concluding, let me just tell you that within the Unacademy platform, new batches have been introduced for CSE 2020-21, 2022, and 2023. These all have started on September 22nd. And in case you want to refer more to these, you can refer to the Unacademy platform and have the detailed understanding of this, all these courses. There are 1 year courses, there are 2 year courses, there are 3 year courses, and you can, according to your journey, according to your preparation strength, you can start your preparation, or you can continue your preparation from these schemes, right? So I hope this was helpful. You can refer to these information from the Unacademy platform for further reference or further information, right? So thank you so much, and if there are any suggestions, or if there is anything, any topic that you want me to cover, you can write it down in the chat box and I would try and cover it, right? Thank you so much for being here, for being part of this class.